All right, we're getting started. Y'all know him, y'all love him. He's got one of the best Twitters around. He's the Liberty meme king and the best RV salesman on the Front Range. Give it up for one of the best activists in the state, Brandon Wark.
Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. For how many of you out here, this is your first Liberty on the Rocks? Raise your hand. That's awesome, great. So definitely encourage you to come back. It's always a different speaker, different events and stuff like that, but definitely a lot of fun. We're building a great community here and then also in Northern Colorado as well. But, we're going to talk a little bit about the legislature tonight. So a lot to talk about. I'm going to fly through some of the slides just because there's so much material. So hold your questions to the end, and I'm happy to go into detail on anything else. But, I guess one of the main points to get across is, what if I told you there's this group of people who meet in dark, locked back rooms, smoke-filled rooms, smoking their cigars, drinking their expensive bourbon, making plans for your paycheck, plans for your guns, plans for your business, plans for your children. Well, it's not a conspiracy, it's reality, right? I mean, less than a mile from here, down at the state capitol, we have some of the most important politicians that affect our daily lives, and I guarantee you, most people have no idea who they are. So it's so important to focus on the local level, and that's really what I want to focus on tonight, is kind of exposing some of the stuff that's going on to hopefully encourage people to get a little bit more involved. Thankfully, we're done with the legislative session this year, but there's always going to be more opportunity next year, unfortunately. So we'll go ahead and go through just briefly about myself. Born and raised here in Colorado. I was truly fortunate to have worked on cruise ships for a couple years. Really taught me how valuable we have it here. Started volunteering. I worked for the National Association for Gun Rights back in 2015. Did some campaign consulting. But it was really COVID, that terrible, terrible time that I started Free State Colorado. Because I wanted to have a voice. I wanted to have a way to express what was going on and how wrong it was. So I started Free State Colorado, and it's really taken off, thankfully, and been a great outlet to kind of expose some of what's been happening. So talk a little bit about, of course, our main subject tonight is the Colorado General Assembly. This wonderful group of people. So we have 100 legislators serving down there at the state capitol, 35 in the state senate, 65 in the state house. Now, I don't know about you, but the idea that one state senator can represent 165,000 people seems pretty ridiculous to me, Like, how can they possibly do that, right? You could go into a whole tirade about the myth of democratic government or myth of representative government, but nonetheless, this is a reality we're faced with. In the state house, it's a little bit better, 65 state house members for just shy of 89,000 people. So 89,000 people to one state rep. Kind of wanted to show people, no surprise probably for people who've been following politics here in Colorado, that the Democrats have a pretty strong majority. And it's very interesting to see. We'll get into a little bit about some of the splits within the Democratic Party and what's going on down there. One of the more interesting subjects this year. But there you go. So right now, there's 23 Democrats to 12 Republicans in the state Senate and 46 Democrats to 19 Republicans in the state House. So you'd have to think, the Democrats can have their way, right? Pretty much any bill they want to put forward can become law. It's not quite exactly the truth, and I'll kind of show you why. So some of the details of the state legislature. Don't know how that hammer and sickle got there, but I guess it's fitting. 120 days. Thankfully, Colorado doesn't have a year-round legislature, right? That would be an absolute disaster if that was the case. Only 120 days, so from January to May, so it just finished up about a week and a half ago or so, 2 weeks. So thankfully, they're done. The damage is done, so that's why we do this talk. I think this is my fourth year doing this talk, kind of going over some of the good, the bad, the ugly, some of what's been going on down there. Each legislator gets to introduce 5 bills, mostly. They're able to introduce more, unfortunately, as well, but in general, it's about 5 is their cap. Thankfully, Colorado does have a balanced budget requirement. So unlike the federal government, they can't take on debt. They have to really balance that budget, balance those books every year, which is another reason why the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights is so important. So in 1992, the voters of Colorado passed a constitutional amendment, Article 10, Section 20 in our state constitution called the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. And it's actually a right each individual taxpayer has here in Colorado. It does a lot of great things, including limiting state revenue. So if the government collects too much in tax money, that money has to come back to the people, to the taxpayers. So if you filed your taxes this year, which I know not everybody in here did probably, but nonetheless, Could have gotten an $800 check back, right? $1,600 for joint filing couples. That's your taxpayer's Bill of Rights refund coming back to you. Also requires that voters have to give approval for tax increases. So, of course, very important. Really, this is some of the most important things that has kept Colorado as free as we are. Doesn't always feel that way, but thankfully we still have a lot of those freedoms because of the taxpayer's Bill of Rights. And the fact that the state government, these state politicians can't just raise our taxes willy-nilly like they can in other states. So really important things to protect, really, if we want to keep freedom and expand our freedom here. Looking at the leadership down at the state capitol, as of course, the Democrats control both houses, so they pick the leadership. So Speaker of the House, Julie McCluskey, I'll talk about her briefly. Chris DeGray Kennedy, trying to do everything he can to get rid of taxpayer Bill of Rights. Some other figures here. Steve Fenberg, Senate President, definitely some of the more powerful people down at the state capitol. So if there's somebody down there that you're like, want to blame for everything, it's easy to blame the governor. It's this Polis's fault and all the stuff he does. You really got to look at the Speaker of the House, the Senate President, and these other people because they're really responsible for controlling the calendar, controlling which bills get heard and which bills die. So it's really important to put a face and a name to some of this bad legislation we're going to talk about. So I did want to talk about briefly, I did an interview with Representative Scott Bottoms earlier this year, and he did not hold back at all. I mean, he said the speaker's unhinged, she's absolutely crazy. So I just want to play a brief little clip of what he said down there. I was kind of shocked, because usually there's that sense of decorum or not going off, going too far. So let's see if this plays here. If I can figure out how to get it to play. Well, maybe not.
Well, they're not her rules. They're the rules of the House, and they're the Constitution. And literally, she is unhinged. She does not need to be in that leadership position.
As I was talking about Julie McCluskey down there, the Speaker of the House.
The Democrats were getting more and more out of control with using rules that should not have been used. Unethical behavior, breaking rules that are in existence, going against the Constitution, and specifically Speaker McCluskey picking on me and a couple other representatives that just don't agree with her. We weren't breaking rules, we weren't doing anything wrong, but she doesn't like what we say, and so she harasses, specifically me. She harasses me a lot. She has called me in the office and yelled and screamed at me. I mean, this is unhinged, crazy behavior.
Just want to give you a little flavor of what it's like down there, right? I mean, so unhinged, crazy behavior. It's very interesting to see. So let's talk a little bit about, that was back in January. So I was talking about the special session years previous. Let's get into the 2024 circus, what we've seen since this January here. So just a quick snapshot here of the class of 2024 down at the state capitol, colorized, of course. So actually, as you probably know or may have heard, we have literal socialists. There's something called the Democratic Socialists of America. They brag on their website. They're the largest socialist organization since the Communist Party was forced to disband. So, I mean, these people, if you read what they want, what they believe in, it's absolutely shocking. Flies in the face of course, the Constitution, property rights. And we have literal card-carrying members of the Democratic Socialists of America serving in our state government. Some of the more recognizable ones here, you got Tim Hernandez with his little Marxist fist of power there, celebrating a prohibition against employees having to go to meetings that might have a religious connotation. Really happy to pass that. We have Elizabeth Epps in the middle there, HBO star. She had her own HBO documentary, just to give you an idea. And then Lorena Garcia, somebody who, she's her little selfie she posted on Twitter here of listening to Republicans down at the state house. So these people want to do everything they can to take your guns away, raise your taxes, and just create more control over your life. So I really hope people understand the situation we're in down there and how crazy it is. Wanted to just show another quick little video here off Twitter. I don't know if anybody's heard of.
I look like someone who has a mental disorder? I mean, some people would say that in the affirmative, but it's a rhetorical question. Does somebody who does all the good policy that I do, no, I'm not even going to go there.
That was Brianna Titone saying, do I look like somebody who has a mental disorder? Just thought that would bring up. All right, let me figure out how to get this. nonetheless, just to give you an idea of some of the personalities that are down there serving in the state legislature. So let's get into some of the major stories this year, kind of the context of what was going on with our wonderful esteemed legislators. So we have Minority Leader Mike Lynch, Republican from Weld County, his first year being the minority leader down there until it came out that he got arrested for a DUI, had a gun on him, driving from Boulder to back up to Weld County, of course, pulled the card. Do you know who I am? I'm a, legislator down there at the state capitol, and, told the cop he had a gun, almost reached for it. Could end up a lot worse for this guy, but he resigned from leadership pretty quick. So one of the stories that happened towards the beginning of the session this year, we got Senator Faith Winter down there, another rock star of the Democratic Party, who showed up to a town meeting totally wasted, blasted in North Glen. The police basically had to make sure she got an Uber back. So yeah, she had a rough time. I hate to make fun of people for their substance abuse issues, but when it's somebody who's trying to take away our freedoms and liberties, maybe we can laugh a little bit, right? Another big story down there was Jenna Griswold being impeached. There was an impeachment proceeding initiated by House Republicans to try and get Jenna Griswold out. Of course, you can expect the results. Democratic supermajority, it's not going anywhere. But nonetheless, I'm not a Republican. I'm a libertarian, proudly, but at the same time, seeing the Republicans stand up against the Democrats and doing everything they can in this extreme minority position by trying to impeach the Secretary of State over everything she's done to try and get Trump off the ballot, kind of rig the election, if you will. It was good to see. It was good to see them have a spine down there, right? People want that. Another big story this year, of course, everybody knows what happened in Israel back in October 7th. The state house, they have the state legislature and the Senate and the House. They can have guests. They have esteemed people come in, ambassadors come visit, and they recognize them on the floor and bring them in. So there's all these victims of the Hamas attack, all these people with Israeli families, people who are members are still missing, like a terrible situation. And so they got in the state Senate. They got recognized. They brought them into the state Senate. Tried to go in the state House, invited by some from Republicans, some Jewish Republican members, inviting these people into the House to recognize them and kind of talk about it. Well, Speaker McCluskey turned them away and said, we don't want to deal with this. And if you don't know why, it's because some of the members, some of these Democratic socialists, are so vehemently against Israel that she knew it was going to be a bad situation. In a way, she's got to play politics. If she brings these people in there and you have a huge outburst, it's going to look really bad on the Democratic caucus. So she's trying to protect that. So it's understandable, but of course, just a sign of the times, kind of giving you that context of what it's like down there at the state capitol this year. Another list that came out this year was some banned words, quote unquote. Not literally banning them, but House Democrats told the Republicans, because you have some outspoken Republicans like Scott Bottoms, Ken DeGraff, Stephanie Luck coming out there and saying these things. So they released this list saying, hey, it's really insensitive. You can't say illegal. You can't say undocumented. You can't say invader, squatter. I don't know why squatter is not used anymore, but you got to say they're new arrivals or applicants or non-citizens. So that was a big push. There was a really good funny list that was released. I don't know if you saw it on some Twitter parody account listing like Democrats banned the word truth and they banned the word God and they banned all these other things. That was fake. This is the real list. Nonetheless, one of the big stories down there. One of the more interesting aspects, right? Like you think, the Democrats control everything. They're this cohesive unit. They're this behemoth Goliath group that can do everything they want. Well, it's not the case. There's a massive split in the Democratic caucus between the socialists and the more moderate members. It's pretty interesting, actually, to be trying to root for some of these moderate Democrats down there. I never thought I'd be doing that. So this is back from January. Sandra Fish, a journalist for the Colorado Sun, said that Senator Tom Sullivan and candidate Chad Clifford at House 27 Vacancy Committee both mentioned the possibility of a vote of no confidence in the Speaker, Julie McCluskey, and a potential censure of Rep. Epps for her anti-Israel comments. So you can see kind of that more moderate Democrats pushing back against more ideological Democrats. Pretty interesting. You got Junie over here. Can't remember her last name, but she's serving down at the state capitol. She's one of the more radical ones, and she is attacking the Speaker of the House, on Twitter, saying, what kind of message is this from the party chair? Because the party chair also jumped in on this too. Quote, it's our incumbent's job to make sure that they have a message that doesn't inspire anyone to run against them if they want to be able to continue to serve as a Democratic nominee in the general election. So very interesting to see the more moderate established Democrats fighting against the more socialists, this insurgency that's happening within the party. Very, very interesting to see. And part of the split that we're seeing is we have Democrats primary campaign, which we'll see in about 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks when ballots start dropping, where more moderate Democrats are actually running candidates funded by other legislators to replace their colleagues in the state legislature. So Tim Hernandez, absolutely crazy guy, one of the most radical members down there. You have Cecilia Espinoza, who I believe is a former judge or attorney or something like that, but she's received contributions from former state representative Benvenidez' leadership fund, former state reps Dan Pabon, Joel Judd. So all these other more moderate Democrats who've been in the system for a long time are basically trying to get some of these socialists out, trying to clean house in their own party. So pretty interesting to see that split. Another example is Epps. This was a picture of her taken during the special session back in November when she got up in the gallery with the pro-Palestinian protesters, and they shut down the state legislature. They had to call the state patrol in. They banned everybody in there. I mean, there was people getting hauled down handcuffs, and they were floating their Palestinian flags over the balcony. You know, I don't know what they think the state legislature is going to do in terms of funding for Israel or anything like that. I don't think they care. It's really about getting attention, getting the message out, right? That's why they do a lot of this political theater. So there's this guy, Sean Camacho. He's been endorsed by current 19 Democratic members of the General Assembly. So that's current 19 people serving out down there. Epps doesn't have any endorsements from anybody else down there. Of course, some of her socialist friends would support her. But you got Monica Duran, who's the House Majority Leader, Shannon Byrd. I mean, all these other lists goes on and on of all these, the Senate President. They're basically trying to get Epps out, which is very interesting to see. So that's some of the major stories down there. This year, heavily involved with the legislative session, Michael Vance, wherever you're at back there, there he is, legislative director of the Libertarian Party, and myself, we did live streams. We did like 18 live streams this year, every Sunday night, going over all the bills that were being heard in committee that year, 2-hour live streams. So the big challenge with this presentation was trying to cut it down and trim it down because there's so much craziness going on down there. But if anybody's interested, definitely get on Free State Colorado YouTube, and you can really go into that deep dive. We had some great guest stars on there. You see the mayor of Keensburg, of course, our Psyched for You and our good psychedelic friends over here as well, advocates speaking out. So kind of talking about some of the bills. And of course, you got Rich Guggenheim here in the corner. You can see him up there. He joined us in talking about some of these gender bills as well. So we had a great time going over all the bills this year. So some of the agendas, right? Here's some news articles, kind of give you an idea of what the agenda is. What's the agenda from these legislators? What are they trying to do? So, here's a couple news headlines. Bill to give local control over flavored tobacco bans, clear Senate. Guns would be banned everywhere from arenas to zoos under new Democratic bill. Colorado Democrats push to end new oil drilling by 2030. Colorado lawmakers seek to regulate dating apps. Following the cardiologist case, something clearly has to be done for these dating apps, dangerous dating apps. So give you an idea of some of the stuff that they're pushing down there. A TikTok time limit, pop-up warnings proposed for youth, Colorado youth on social media late at night. House Democrats kill the bill against raping children. That was a little bit of controversy down there with that one, Colorado Senate passes bill exempting lawmakers from part of open meetings law. That was a big one. Colorado bill would limit hard liquor sales to liquor stores. So this is some of the agenda, some of the stuff that was pushed, some of the stuff that was pushed out in the media for what they were doing this year. So some of the major themes that we saw kind of gave you some background, some of the players, some of the characters, some of the agenda that they're pushing. But let's dig into some of the bills. So let's talk about some of the good stuff. I like to think if we had liberty-minded individuals serving down there, we had people who believed in freedom and truth and justice in the American way, what kind of bills would they push? Well, this was a good one. This was House Bill 1023, civil forfeiture reform. Civil asset forfeiture is an absolutely terrible practice where people have to lose their money, lose their property without even being convicted of a crime. So, I say that now the Democrats are supporting the police by killing this bill, but I wanted to put the list up here of who voted against it, the yeses were to kill the bill. But unfortunately, you had some Republicans like Ryan Armagost, Gabe Evans, and I believe Snyder on there as well, Matt Soper, these Republicans who you think, hey, they're supposed to stand up for liberty and justice, but unfortunately, now when it comes to the police, if it comes to the police, they're on that side of the issue, you know what I mean? So this bill died, unfortunately, as you can expect. Colorado has had some civil asset forfeiture reform over the past several years, but this one didn't make it. Another good one that the governor actually supports, believe it or not, Jared Polis is totally for ending the state income tax, one of his good issues that he's on. And so 1065, following the governor's wishes, lowering the state income tax from 4.4% to 4%. I mean, a modest cut. Of course, this bill got killed. Didn't make it very far, unfortunately. One that did pass. Really happy to see this one. This is the alcohol beverage delivery and takeout. So, during COVID, one of the rules they put out was making it so people can get their alcohol to go. You order from a restaurant because you can't go into the restaurant. So one of the only good things to come from COVID is now that we have permanent rules here in Colorado, permanent law that passed this year and the governor signed to allow for alcoholic beverage delivery and takeout. So have one for the road, folks. One of the other big issues, of course, is housing. Housing. That's the number one thing everybody's talking about. Colorado's so expensive. Nobody can pay their rent. There's, all these people moving here, and we got to find a place to put them all, right? So the governor's idea, these politicians' ideas, let's just cram them in. Let's just build high rises and fill these small suburban communities with high density housing. And hey, we'll put it around mass transit as well. Kind of kill two birds with one stone. So one of the bills that did pass this year, one of the first bills to make it through, House Bill 1007, prohibiting residential occupancy limits. So basically saying that no local government can restrict how many people are living in a house unless it's for health or safety reasons. So, from a liberty perspective, maybe that's a good thing, right? These local governments can't tell people who own their own home how many people can stay there. But also from a liberty perspective, now we have this state top-down policy pushed from the state legislators, forcing all these small communities to go by these rules that maybe don't fit their community, right? It's a lack of decentralization. It's a centralization of political power is a lot of this housing legislation. So another one, the just cause evictions, 1098. This is the lease renewal requirements. So basically, if you're a renter here in Colorado now, they have to renew your lease unless you're not paying, unless you're substantially violating the lease or something, or you want to move into the property or do substantial renovations. The landlord or property owner has to legally renew you. Basically, that's a total violation of property rights, right? I mean, if somebody owns their property, they should be able to decide who lives there or not, but, not from the perspective of some of these politicians. Javier Marbre, for example, is actually an eviction attorney. That's his day job, aside from being a legislator, so it's kind of a little conflict of interest because he's able to pass legislation that's going to directly benefit him in his private practice. So, a pretty interesting bill, but I would say a bad one from a liberty perspective, of course. Accessory dwelling units, you heard of granny flats or mother-in-law houses or ADUs is what they're calling them, but basically forcing small municipalities to allow these second homes or third homes or little houses to be built on properties, overriding local governments. So, local governments don't necessarily want to cram multiple houses onto a single plot of land, but now they'll be able to do that with certain restrictions, of course. So another bill that passes here. This is how they're trying to solve the housing issue, of course. Another interesting one, House Bill 1175, local government's rights to property for affordable housing. So giving them a right of first refusal, they're making you an offer you can't refuse. You have an affordable housing unit that takes tax money. You want to sell it? Well, the local government's going to have first dibs from now on. You can't go and sell it to a private company or a private individual. It's really up to the local government to say, no, we don't want it. Go ahead and sell it to who you want, but you got to come ask us first if we want it. So, right of first refusal, not necessarily the best idea. So you kind of see a theme of how these politicians think, right? How these legislators are trying to manipulate the market and force this one-size-fits-all solution on a lot of these local communities. Another one, I don't know about you, but coming down to Denver, I always tell people coming into Liberty on the Rocks, there's free parking. That's one of the most important, one of the best aspects of the Independence Institute. They got their own parking lot. You don't have to pay for parking. Because parking is tough in downtown Denver and a lot of other areas. But this bill that passed this year, House Bill 1304, eliminates minimum parking requirements. So say you're a developer building some high-density housing, building an apartment building, and usually you'd have to build a certain number of parking spaces to accommodate the people moving into that apartment building to kind of ensure that same quality of life for the community. Well, no more. You can build as much housing as you want in apartment buildings with no parking lots whatsoever. So, your side streets, your suburban neighborhoods, crowded with parking lots, or crowded with cars is kind of what this is going to lead to, if you ask me. But of course, these politicians have this idea they can socially engineer society, right? If they just pass the law, if they just change the codes, if they just do this and do that, everybody's going to follow along with their whims. They have this perfect knowledge that's going to decide how we're going to react and how we're going to live. But of course, we know it doesn't work that way. Another one, this is one of the signature bills of the year, House Bill 1313, the Housing and Transit-Oriented Communities. So basically, this is kind of that carrot and the stick we see so often from legislators, from these politicians to say, hey, listen, little suburban town or little small rural community, you want some of this tax money? I know the people in your community are paying the taxes, they're paying the gas tax, they're paying federal taxes that we get back through this highway tax fund. But if you want that money, you have to build high-density housing surrounded by transit corridors. So the idea is here, you can kind of see a theme, right? They're going to cram people in, eliminate parking, and then basically hold grant money back from communities unless they build these high-density housing around these mass transit lines. So that's your light rail, your bus stops, your RTD parking structures, and things like that. they're going to try and get these local communities to build up those areas. And that's their plan, to kind of redesign Colorado to create this more high-density area. I know I said that word a lot, but it's kind of how it goes. 15-minute cities all day. So, of course, one of the big topics down there is guns. But I want to take a quick little segue here and just go into this. We have Dr. Scott Shamblin in the back. This is the first year I've seen. I've been following Colorado politics for a long time. We actually had somebody show up at the state capitol and kind of give some testimony that maybe was a little bit different than what people expected. So just want to play this clip real quick.
I'm a proud Democrat and especially proud of our great history. While I am not a birthing person, I am a fertilizing person, and I oppose this bill. The very idea that such a bill would be proposed is an act of violence on birthing and fertilizing persons alike. It is a threat to our way of life. It is a threat to my way of life. I want to start by telling you of my lived experience. In the last 2 years, I've personally seen how this issue is a birthing person's issue. 7 of my partners over the last 2 years became pregnant. 7. And you know what? Babies are the woman's issue, and they took care of their issues appropriately. How, you might ask? For abortion. Had I not had this option, I would be a parent to at least 7 different children with 7 different birthing mothers. This is unacceptable. It would ruin me financially and completely destroy my self-indulgent way of life. If abortion becomes illegal, I will be unable to continue exercising my freedoms without consequence and actually be held accountable for my actions. I am fortunate to have had a Darwinian education. It is immoral to painfully prolong the survival of the weak when we could remove them from the equation to accelerate our evolutionary progress. I am a proud supporter of Planned Parenthood's legacy. It's doing exactly as our foremother, Margaret Sanger, peace be upon her, designed it to do, to keep the poor, undesirable, genetically inferior populations down by intentionally putting Planned Parenthoods in communities dominated by the genetically inferior. We have successfully crumbled these communities. It is good and merciful to abort pregnancies that won't have an easy life. A life of financial struggle, mental health issues, physical disabilities, discrimination, systemic racism, and any discomfort at all is not a life worth living. We should not allow someone to live if they cannot live, laugh, love their best life. This is the democratic way. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. All hail Gorlock the Destroyer.
Thank you. And testimony takes a lot of forms, sometimes satire, and a wink to the bill sponsor tells us all we need. We appreciate you being here this evening. Please hold for questions.
That's hilarious. I definitely talked to Scott afterwards. He did some amazing testimony down there at the Capitol. Really funny stuff. But I do want to encourage people, show up. It's so accessible, so easy for you to be down there, whether you want to do something like that or just speak to the bill and give an impassioned statement about why some of this stuff is so wrong or maybe why it's right, maybe something you support. But we really need to have, if we want to have liberty, if we want to have a representative government, we need people to get involved. I mean, that's really it. But let's get on to guns. Yes, you need another gun. So a quick list here of the gun bills that died, the gun bills that passed. I know I'm leaving off 1 or 2, but these are definitely the big ones. So, of course, 1292, that was the bill that was the most scary, frightening bill. It would have banned about 80% of the guns that are sold in Colorado, the most commonly owned firearms out there. Last year, if you remember in 2023, it didn't make it out of committee. This year in 2024, it made it out of the committee in the House and actually passed the state House. It passed the state House, unbelievably, one of the worst gun bans we've ever seen. But it did die in the state Senate. State Senate did kill the bill, thankfully. So really happy to see that. There's a couple different reasons why, but very happy to see. So part of the point is the optimism, right? Like, you say, oh, these radical Democrats, these socialists are down there in the state capitol. Well, hey, the assault weapons bill didn't pass. There's still some hope out there in terms of pushing back a little bit against some of this tyranny, this authoritarianism, right? 1270 also died. That would have required liability insurance for every gun owner in Colorado. So if you buy a gun, you'd have to have an insurance policy that says, if you shoot somebody, if somebody breaks in your house and you blast them away, then you better be insured. So totally unconstitutional bill. Of course, most of these are. Thankfully, that bill has failed as well. Senate Bill 131 did pass, expanding gun-free zones. Originally, that bill was going to ban guns, as we saw that news article headline, in pretty much every public place where there's gatherings and people and churches and zoos and theaters and everywhere. But thankfully, that bill did get stripped down. So at the very least, they only made it down to schools. So it's still a bad bill, but definitely not as bad as it could have been, thankfully. 1174, if anybody has a concealed carry permit, this is a bill, or thinking about getting a concealed carry permit, this is a really bad bill, scary bill, basically increasing the training requirements, making you have to have live fire training, take these tests, pay more money, making it a lot more difficult for somebody to get their concealed carry permit in Colorado. Really bad bill. One of the bad parts about that is really, the discriminatory aspect that people who work for a living, they can't take time off and go do a 5-hour, 8-hour course. And part of the material they give you is like the propaganda. You'd have to be able to go over all the gun laws and know all of the different laws and restrictions that you have as a gun owner. So unfortunately, that bill did pass. Another scary bill, Senate Bill 66. Don't use your credit card. Don't use your credit card if you go to a gun store, if you're buying ammo or really anything, any firearm accessory, because now there's a new merchant code that is going to pop up for any credit card purchase at a gun store. And, we've seen it in other states. If they think you're suspicious, you're spending too much money, or maybe they tie that to something else that they don't like your social media or something like that, you can be targeted. You can be investigated. We've seen this happen in other places, so expect that. In Colorado, just pay cash. Don't really use a credit card if you can. House Bill 1348, vehicle storage requirements. So if you have a firearm in your car, it needs to be locked up, inaccessible, making it harder for you to be able to defend yourself if you come across some violent mob. Bad bill did pass. House Bill 1349. So really hoping Governor Polis vetoes this bill. I think he still has that opportunity. So when a bill passes, the governor doesn't have to sign it for it to become law. Governor can sign it, have his little media opportunity and photo op, and he can sign it in front of the cameras, and everybody can celebrate, or he can just let it become law without signing it. He has to, if he wants to veto it, he has to go in and veto it. But if he wants it to become law without signing his name to it, he can just sit back and eventually it'll become law, I think within 14 days or so, if I'm not mistaken. So now, if this bill, if he doesn't veto it, in November, Colorado voters will be subjected to voting on a gun and ammo tax because of the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights. Has to go to the people. The people will have the opportunity to turn it down or support it. So keep your eye out for that this November. House Bill 1353, the state permitting for gun shops. Gun shops are already so heavily regulated at the federal level. They have to have that federal firearms license. This creates a whole new licensing scheme and registration scheme and fingerprinting for everybody working there and background checks and all this really bad stuff here in the state of Colorado. That did pass, unfortunately. Senate Bill 3, weaponizing the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, giving them $1.7 million to go after gun shops. Maybe you have a gun shop who's kind of skirting the law a little bit, selling that 30-round magazine when they're only legally supposed to sell 15 or less. Well, now CBI is going to get more money to go after them. So you can kind of see this whole package of gun bills. The reality is, these legislators, if they could, they would totally take away the Second Amendment, at least most of them. Not all of them, thankfully, as we've seen, but a lot of them down there are full-on 100% gun ban types of people, which is kind of interesting when they're the abolish the police, democratic socialist types. So it makes you kind of wonder what their real agenda is there. So gender stuff, you can't not talk about that this day and age in 2024. Looking at this one, the House Bill 1039 was a really controversial bill. This bill got people kicked out of committee hearings. People were going crazy on this one. But basically, students in schools, we heard about from some people earlier about schools and what they can do behind parents' backs. Well, this kind of institutionalizes a little bit more of that. So, say your kid is a pretty impressionable young kid, and their counselor or art teacher tells them, hey, maybe you're really a girl, Sally. Maybe you should go by Sally instead of Johnny. And if Johnny agrees and says, yeah, call me Sally. Now, legally, the teachers, the staff, and everybody at the school have to call them Sally thanks to this bill. So no parental guidelines, no parental permissions. The staff just basically says, this is the kid's preferred name. We got to go with it. You can kind of see how there's an opportunity there for maybe abusing the system or maybe, for lack of a better word, grooming some children, right? So this bill did pass, really controversial bill. Another one, House Bill 1071, the name change to conform with gender identity, the quote-unquote tiaras law. So somebody who's a felon gets out of jail, says, hey, I've changed my gender, I have a different identity now, I should change my name. Well, this bill basically states that good cause for a felon, for a criminal previous criminal at least, to change their name is their gender identity. So there are some problems with this one. People saw that maybe you have a violent criminal getting out of jail and then changing their name, making it a little bit harder for them to be tracked or followed or people be aware of who this violent criminal is. So that's kind of the idea behind that bill that caused also a lot of controversy, of course. So let's talk about some of the bills that are just plain dumb. Now, this is going to take about 45 more minutes, so I hope you're comfortable. Just joking. There's some bad ones on there. Real quick, just want to show another quick clip here. This is from, whoops. This is Ken DeGraff. He's definitely one of our liberty leaders down at the state capitol.
The purpose of socialism is communism. The purpose of communism is hell.
I don't know if you heard that. The purpose of socialism is communism. The purpose of communism is hell. Another legislator who doesn't hold back, who definitely got a gavel down quite a bit this year. But I love that line from Ken DeGraff down there. This is from, and some of these clips are from Val. If you follow Val on Twitter, if you don't already, good stuff. Just while we're on the parent stuff, you know, I don't want to play this whole clip necessarily, but this is Stephanie V. Hill, representative from Colorado Springs.
Money that we spend should be to benefit children. They're the most vulnerable among us and they have no choices. But everything that would protect them and empower them at a public level, conservatives are against it. They always come back to the same argument. I feel like we don't challenge them on it at all, which is, well, the parents should be doing that. That's a parent's job. That should happen at home. Parents should do that. Why? Says who?
Why is it not up to all of us wonderful politicians to decide what kids need? So just to give you an idea of some of the thought process of the people down there, you know, it's an accident of birth who you're born to. We don't need the parents to really have a say in terms of how the kids are raised. Let's just, you know, the politicians can do a better job, of course. Stephanie V. Hill also hates her parents, as you may have noticed. Her Twitter rants and Instagram rants against her parents, yeah, that explains a lot. So, oh my gosh, James Coleman. James Coleman's a cool guy. He's a really nice guy, but he thought it would be a good idea, you know, to protect the children from novelty lighters. You know, those dangerous toilet-shaped or guitar-shaped or gun-shaped lighters. Oh gosh, can you imagine a gun-shaped lighter? That's two bad things at once. Oh my gosh. So this bill, thankfully, did die, but would have banned the interstate transportation of counterfeit lighters, unsafe lighters, or novelty lighters in Colorado. So thankfully, we have politicians like James Coleman down there protecting us from novelty lighters. Bad bill did fail, thankfully. Ridiculous. Come on, these people want to take all the fun out of our lives. Come on, I want to have a funny lighter. This is one of my favorite bills of the year. One of the most ridiculous, absolutely crazy, and it is real. It's 100% real. Fact check this, please, people. House Bill 1163, Regina English. She couldn't get anybody else to sponsor the bill. It died in its first committee hearing. She admitted it was absolutely ridiculous. It died on a vote of 12-0. Not a single person thought it was a good idea. Quote, the bill requires the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture to develop, implement, and maintain an online pet animal registration system. The bill establishes the Pet Animal Registration Enterprise in the Department of Agriculture to provide business services to pet animal owners who pay pet registration fees to the enterprise by developing, implementing, maintaining, and administrating the Pet Animal Registration System, connecting pet animals with their owners and designated caregivers when and after emergencies occur, and protecting pet animals by supporting animal shelters that are caretakers of last resort. A pet animal owner must register the pet animal in the system annually for a fee set by the enterprise, which must be no more than $8.50 annually per pet animal with a designated caregiver, $16 annually per pet animal that is a dog or cat that is not neutered or spayed, and on and on and on. Can you imagine? I mean, you got to register your pet because, you know, what something happens to you, you have to have this pet registration system so they know who the pet's caretaker is if you unexpectedly pass away. Makes perfect sense, right? So bad bill, absolutely ridiculous. I mean, absolutely crazy. It's totally ridiculous. Register your pets, people. A couple other bills I want to talk about with government transparency. So that's a big issue, a real more serious issue, right? The idea of representative government or democracy, or this idea that we know what's going on. We know what these politicians are up to. We know what they're doing. I mean, that's a cornerstone of a constitutional republic, right? It's a cornerstone of a free and open society. Well, unfortunately, not all our legislators agree. So some of the bills that passed, actually one passed, one died. Senate Bill 157, clarifying. You got to clarify what open meetings laws mean. So this is a quote from the Great Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition's article on this. They said that the exemptions will encourage legislators to formulate and debate public business in an unlimited way via email, text message, and ephemeral messaging apps such as Signal without the public's knowledge and scrutiny. So the idea is, you know, basically we've got to clarify what's a public meeting, which is subject to Colorado's sunshine laws, open records acts, etc., and what's not. So this bill was actually passed back in March. So a year ago, this is kind of that split in the Democratic caucus. Elizabeth Epps she did a good thing. She actually sued the Speaker of the House last year, along with Bob Marshall, because they were violating open meetings laws. They were having these secret meetings, trying to get stuff going around the public. She did a good thing. You got to give her credit when you can. Well, this year they weren't having it. So they said, well, guess what? We can change the law. You're not going to sue us anymore because we're going to change the law. So back in March, they passed this bill immediately out of committee, immediately through the chambers. Governor signed it the ink wasn't even dry on his desk. So that way, from March to May, the rest of the legislative session, they can make sure to maintain some of their privacy away from the public, maintain some of their meetings out of the public eye. So kind of a really bad one there. Thankfully, John Caldera Independence Institute, they're actually putting together a ballot initiative to repeal most of that bill. Interesting information there. Another one that died, this would have been absolutely devastating, House Bill 1296, the modifications to Colorado Opens Record Act. They would potentially be able to categorize you as a vexatious requester. If you're requesting too many open records requests, if you were asking for too much information, too much transparency from the politicians, they could say you're a vexatious requester and we can deny your request. You're asking too many questions. Of course, the media would not be subject to that. There's always an exception or a little carve out for the media. Would delayed our core requests from getting them back, increase the cost, etc. Thankfully, this bill died this last week of the legislature. Didn't make it, made it out of the House, made it to the Senate, and then the Senate just didn't even pick it up. So in that last committee hearing. So thankfully, that bill died. But some really bad anti-transparency stuff. Other bills of interest. Let's see what we got. A really bad bill that's come up multiple times. Mixed thoughts on this one, from a liberty perspective, but House Bill 1028, the overdose prevention centers, aka safe injection sites, this bill did die. It did make it out of the House, but died in the Senate, in its first Senate Health and Human Services Committee. Basically would have allowed local municipalities, cities, towns, and counties to authorize the operation of an overdose prevention center within their boundaries for the purpose of saving lives of persons at risk of preventable overdoses. So, what's the worst that can happen? You open up a place and people can come in and do what drugs they want. Nothing bad, I'm sure, would ever happen there. That bill died. This one got killed quick. It was interesting to see when the Aspenites and the Vail people and the Steamboat Springs and all these wealthy homeowners up in the mountains, this bill didn't even make it to its first committee hearing for like 3 months, and then it died so fast. Senate Bill 33 would have created quadrupling property taxes for people who own second homes that rent them out. Not even second homes, but say you own a property in the mountains, Airbnb, Vrbo, whatever, all those things. If it was so many days a year, it'd be considered commercial property, and you would pay commercial property taxes, quadrupling it from the residential property tax rate. So this bill, it's funny. It didn't make it far at all. Like the people with the money were like, no. We want to rent out our nice little house in Vail or Steamboat when we want to and make our money. So the legislators were like, okay. Senate Bill 43, a bill we've been following since January on our legislative calls, the direct consumer sales of raw milk. Surprisingly enough, Colorado is one of the worst states for food freedom and for raw milk sales. So I was really excited to see a raw milk bill. But, I think it was a little too much or much regulation. I think there was a little, it would have allowed the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment to inspect raw milk facilities. They'd have to register with the state. There's all this red tape and all this other stuff that a lot of raw milk producers probably didn't want. So this bill ended up dying. Hopefully we'll get a really good, clean raw milk bill next year, just decriminalizing raw milk, letting people do what they want. So there's a lot of opportunity for food freedom, and it's something that Polis, our governor, supports. So I think there's good opportunity there from an activism perspective. This bill, Senate Bill 76, was one of the most comprehensive marijuana bills we've seen in recent history. Would have done a lot. This is a little clip from an article. Basically, not to get in the technicalities of it, but if you're in the industry, it's a big bill. Allowing certain licensed businesses to export and import genetic material from cannabis to other states and countries. Change the business permit renewal process to allow companies with multiple licenses to only apply once. So it's kind of deregulating the cannabis industry just slightly. Permit cannabis retailers to sell non-alcoholic foods and beverages, but it's got to be less than 20% of their store's total sales, or else, can't have that. Phase out the mandate for radio frequency identification technology. I don't know if you know this, but Colorado has RFID tags for all illegal marijuana plants. They have to have little tags on every single plant. Absolutely ridiculous. They're getting rid of that, thankfully. Grant marijuana companies eligibility for new state tax credits that had previously been out of reach. So we're seeing the tide turning. Of course, the news from federal descheduling and this and that. So we're seeing some of the state respond. Unfortunately, Colorado still has, you wouldn't think this, but Colorado has a long ways to go towards decriminalizing or kind of deregulating that marijuana industry. This was a big one, and thank you for you guys in the back who helped kill this bill, for sure. Senate Bill 158, this idea, protect the kids. We got to protect the kids. And, how do we know there's kids on the internet? Well, maybe we got to upload a copy of a driver's license. Or, hey, Colorado's already got a digital ID. Maybe you just got to use your digital ID to register your social media profile. That's how we're going to protect the kids, man, So, really bad bill. Basically would have outlawed, I don't know how this would have held up in court, but outlawed social media platforms from advertising marijuana or psychedelics or other types of, bad things that kids shouldn't be exposed to, quote unquote. And then, forcing these social media companies to basically verify the age of the users of the platform, which how else can you do that except some sort of government ID, right? Come on. So great activism got this bill killed. Thankfully, it was kind of one of those bills that was flying under the radar, but a bill that got stopped towards the end of the session. So thank you to everybody who stopped that. But the bill sponsors are pledging it'll be back next year. So be aware and pay attention to that. Wolverines will be restored to Colorado. So, it's been such a wonderful success with the wolves being released in Colorado. Only so many cows are dying, only so many problems, only at the cost of tens of millions of dollars, to bring these animals who don't necessarily belong here. Wolverines is next on the list, I know a lot of us in this room would like to see a different type of Wolverine back here in Colorado, right? But here we go, introduction of Wolverines. Probably less of a big deal than wolves. I can't imagine they're causing as much of a problem, but one of the more interesting bills this year, for sure. Wrapping it up here, this was the signature transportation bill, of which there were a few, but one of the big ones, this was Fenberg's baby, the president of the Senate, Senate Bill 184, supporting surface transportation infrastructure development. So, as I said earlier, Taxpayers' Bill of Rights, if they want to raise taxes, they got to ask the voters. What if they don't call it a tax? I can't think of this legislator, this politician or bureaucrat who thought of that. He goes, let's not call it a tax. What if we called it something else? Let's call it a fee. It's a fee. So now, thanks to these wonderful politicians, these legislators looking out for every single one of us up there, there's going to be a $3 fee on rental cars in Colorado. Of course, they're making the argument that tourists are going to pay it, but I don't know if you've ever been in a car accident or needed a rental car. A lot of people in the state are going to be paying that too. $3 a day, but it's going to go towards building these trains, these bus routes, these other types of things, these unsustainable mass transit systems that not enough people use. They're just money pits, basically. So they got to figure out how to get more money into the money pit if you want to fill that pit up, right? So one of the ways they're doing it is like, hey, let's tax rental cars. Well, not tax. Let's create a fee for rental cars, and that'll help pay for our Front Range rail plan. So there's a big plan to build rail trains from Pueblo up to Fort Collins and, of course, to Cheyenne and beyond. They've tried to do that. I don't know if anybody's heard of the fast tracks debacle that's been going on for the last 20 years, where the governor at the time back then and the legislators were promising, hey, we're going to charge new taxes, new sales tax fees for everybody in the state, and we're going to build this wonderful train system up to Longmont. This was promised like 20 years ago, and there's no train to Longmont because it's too expensive. They can't afford it. So their new plan is to use Amtrak, because Amtrak, with the federal government's support or backing or whatever, can use these rail lines and kind of override. BNSF is one of the biggest rail companies out there, so they can use their rail lines because of their contract with Amtrak. So if we get the state to use the Amtrak contracts, we can now build this state passenger rail line, but we got to pay for it somehow, and part of it's going to be charging rental cars. So little schemes here and there, folks, little schemes. So that's really what I got. I could go on and on and on, but Josh is already getting upset, so I got to stop it and call it off here. But please stay in touch. I hate calling it X, but get on Twitter. Free State Colorado. Of course, my website. I got some great interviews coming up. Tomorrow night, I'm interviewing Ian Escalante of Rocky Mountain Gun Owners. We're going to do an in-depth conversation about all the gun bills that passed and failed, lawsuits and this and that. Telegram, still my baby since COVID. Love my Telegram. YouTube, Facebook, of course. Facebook kind of sucks, but nonetheless. But I got interviews. Going to be doing a lot of stuff for election strategy, community engagement. And if you've been a longtime follower of Free State Colorado, last year, every single week, I did a weekly roundup where I go over for about a half hour more all the news stories. Put it on hold during the legislative session, but that's coming back, and I'm really excited about it. So definitely check it out. That's what I got, folks. So thank you very much. Definitely take any questions.
Questions?
Hi, Brandon. I agree with a lot of what you say, but some things I don't. You briefly mentioned Gaza, Israel, and October 7th. And I wonder, you gave the impression, as far as I could tell, that you support U.S. policy in that area, like you basically Biden's government funding of Israel. And I wonder if you would say something a little bit more about that topic, about October 7th, and maybe what was happening to the Palestinians before October 7th.
Sure, Mike. Definitely appreciate the comment. Mike Chappelle, good friend, somebody definitely happy to be friends with. No, definitely do not support war, do not support violence, do not support any of that. As a libertarian, I'm 100% anti-war, and I think it's all wrong. But I had to bring it up because it's been a big issue in the state legislature. I mean, we have these, and I guess my main point is, we have these protests, we have these people showing up, and it's like, you're going to the state legislature to protest? Like, they're not doing anything with the overseas. They're not sending Colorado taxpayer money to Israel or Palestine or Ukraine or anywhere else. It's local. People want to protest. I say go protest in front of the senators, the Colorado U.S. senators, Michael Bennett and John Hickenlooper, the Congress people, the congressmen. Go to Diana DeGette's office like you guys were doing during the Assange stuff. Those are the people that need to be talked to or exposed, to if you really want to make a difference. But stuff going on at the state legislature, I mean, when they're trying to take our guns, raise our taxes, interfere with our ability to raise our kids and own our property and run our businesses, it doesn't fit with what's going on locally, I guess is my point. I hope that makes sense.
The woman that didn't want to introduce discussion about this, you basically agree with her on that this isn't the place for it.
I get the point. I understand the political strategy, right? Like I understand the strategy, and I really try and understand all sides, right? And understand the different perspectives that they have. So I get it. I get Speaker McCluskey. She's like, I don't want to bring in the victims of Israeli families here into the state house because it's a distraction from what we're trying to do down at the state capitol. And I know people in my caucus are going to raise a fuss and cause all these issues. It's going to be a major headache for her, and it's going to make her party look bad. That's her prerogative as a leader in that caucus, in that chamber, to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen. So not that I necessarily agree with her, but I understand it. I hope that there's a little bit of nuance to it. These are nuanced, complex conversations, but I don't think foreign policy, we're talking about the state government here in Denver. Foreign policy is not really, it doesn't matter at the state level, that's my opinion.
I just want to mention, I really appreciated the people who went out there and mocked the state legislature and some of the representatives who have been a bit more open in their language. I just want to implore everyone who goes out there, please mock these people because they're terrible. They're not serious people. They're not serious bills, and they should be treated with absolute disdain. So thank you to everyone who does do it that way.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Scott. I mean, my only question for Scott is, how soon did they realize it was a satirical testimony, if you don't mind answering?
It was about a minute in. First minute, Democrats loved me. They're like, yeah, he's got some good points. Republicans, I was talking to Brandy Bradley afterwards. She was like, I was writing down questions for you. I was going to destroy you. Like, birth control, ? GoFundMe birth control. But yeah, they hated me for the first minute, and Democrats loved me. And then flip it in the second minute, and they all figured it out. They're like, oh! Yeah. I got yelled at and gavelled in the non-legal name change bill. It was
awesome. And I hope that's encouraging, too, to echo Josh's point and Scott's point, too, is there's a great community of liberty-minded individuals who are getting involved, who are showing up. We have this great community of individuals out there doing more than ever before, at least what I've seen, in terms of getting involved and kind of trying to hold these politicians to account. So, we got a year basically till next January, but please join us on the live streams. I know we're going to be doing that again. Show up at the Capitol. Maybe we can plan some more stuff and get some good, more pro-liberty legislators elected as well.
I would just also say, if you cannot make it to the Capitol, because, no one wants to be there till 10 o'clock at night and then deal with the cray-crays on Colfax, but you can testify on Zoom. Yeah. And even for me, if you saw some of the testimony that I wrote that I did not give, but actually emailed to them, I love talking about Breonna Tattone and saying women, the non-Y chromosome having type, and just the testimony that I would write that you did not see, that I did not get kicked out of committee for, is it is true.
So thanks. It's just please testify. I try to testify to the bills. There was a testimony that I wrote in the written testimony. I gave 200 journal articles about the harms of social and medical transition on children. And then in my oral testimony, I was like, called out the Democrats, and I said, the party that claims to believe in science just received 200 journal articles about this. Do you believe in science? Your public record will speak for itself. And it's really fun to throw them under the bus on public record. So have fun with it, but honestly, please get involved, because these are your freedoms and your liberties and your children's freedoms and your children's liberties that are on the line right now.
Thanks, Rich.
I found out, and I may be wrong, that there was a ballot initiative for kind of a school voucher. Is that still on the ballot? Do you have any information about that?
Yeah, definitely. So Michael Fields from Advanced Colorado, he's got multiple ballot initiatives. One of them is school choice, basically enshrining in the state constitution that every child and parent in the state of Colorado has a right to school choice. So they're still in the signature gathering phase, but hopefully that gets on there. The legislative website's a great resource. You can actually click on initiatives, and it kind of gives you that whole status. You can read all the text and see who's behind it and who's not. But yeah, there's some really big ballot initiatives, and I'd definitely follow me on Free State Colorado. I'm going to be talking a lot about the ballot initiatives this year, because there's some really interesting stuff coming down the pike. But yeah, school choice hopefully will be on the ballot in November, so that'd be awesome.
I have a quick, another one too. I also found out that there was the yearly initiative by Caldara of reducing the income tax, and he withdrew it. Why did he do that?
I don't know. That's a good question. I thought I checked the Secretary of State's website. It was still on, or the legislative website was still on there yesterday. The initiative was still on there, so I don't know if it's been.
The only explanation is because it's election year or something. That he wants the governor election, that more people go for. I don't know.
I don't either. That's a great question.
Reduce the state income tax in an even numbered year per legislation that exists right now. So if he.
I didn't know that.
Okay. Repeat that. So I don't know.
You may have pulled it because of the budget calculation and the thought that the governor would actually put something forward.
He said he did do it. He said he did reduce it.
There's some controversy here, I guess, because so in Colorado, you can only have an initiative to reduce taxes on even numbered years. So if he pulls it this year, we have to wait 2 more years till 2026 to do it, was what Mary was saying up here. And then also Jessica was saying that.
4.4 to 4.25?
I think so. I have to double check.
His personal attorney said Colorado income tax reduced 4.4 to 4.25. So that not happen?
I don't know. I thought it was still going through, so I don't know if it's been pulled or maybe there was. I don't know. I don't know all the details on it, but definitely something to look into. The other point is Polis is saying they reduced the income tax, and technically there's a bill that they pushed through at the last 2 weeks of the session that would temporarily reduce the income tax if they over-collect a certain amount of money. One of the refund mechanisms in the Taxpayers' Bill of Rights is they can reduce the income tax. So they put that in through, but just basically it's a wash because we just get less tax refund money back. They just would lower the taxes for the next year. So yeah, stuff to keep an eye on for sure.
With Democrats having the majority in both houses and this expectation that they'll have the opportunity to put forward 5 bills, it occurs to me that that could be pressure on some of them. So that's maybe why we get some of these ridiculous bills.
Could be for sure, yeah. You know, some of these politicians, of course, you know, they're politicians for a reason. They have all the answers. You know, they have it all figured out. They need to tell us the rest of us how to live our lives. So of course they have this hubris, this idea, this pretense of knowledge, if you will, that they can decide what's best for everybody else. So yeah, of course, you know, why not register everybody's pets? Why not, you know, create all these new fees? Why not shut down oil and gas? Why not ban guns? You know, let's socially engineer the society that is going to be perfect for everybody. This utopian vision.
So thank you very much. I want to go back to Mike's first question to you. And, you know, I get the focus on being local and being state, but damn it, I want my local and state representatives to be on the right side of history. Yeah. And if they're not, if they're equivocating, then they're not for me.
Well, I'd say if you want advice from an activist perspective, Colorado does have a BDS law, actually, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions, that if some organization is boycotting, divesting, and sanctioning Israel, then the Colorado government's not going to do business with them. So that was passed, I think, in 16 or 15. So if these legislators really believed that or wanted to do that, they could repeal that. So, I mean, I guess, you know, if you want some advice or what to do at the local level, you could go that route. But otherwise, you know, what are they going to do? It's kind of a moot point.
Well, I don't think it's moot, and I appreciate your noting that because that is very telling. Very telling. I'd also like to recognize my guest, Angela Marriott here, the Mama Bear from Jeff County.
I'm just a terrible public speaker. I'm so sorry. I know I'm terrible.
No, you're not. No. But anyway, I'm so glad that she's come to join us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
One thing I need to point out on the whole Israel-Gaza thing, it's a very nuanced position. Both sides have a point, but when it comes to the specific people that are pushing all this, it's not necessarily about the issue, it's about the revolution. When you look at who is pulling the punches, it's these socialists that are trying to strip all of our rights. So they're using this as a tool to get more momentum for more power. It's not necessarily that they really care about Gaza. I mean, you can say, for example, one individual I could think of is Justin Amash, former state representative. Hopefully he wins senator as a Republican in Michigan because he's going to be one of the few people that wins. But he is certainly a victim of all this because Israel actually killed his own family who was hiding in a church that they bombed. It wasn't necessarily that they were going after these individuals. But so there is a whole lot of nuance to this whole situation. But with the people here, especially in Colorado, it's not about the issue, it's about the revolution itself. And the commies are trying to use this as a way to advance their agenda and take away our rights and put themselves in power. Because for them, it's you give me rights according to your principles. I take away your rights according to my principles is how they see it. So we have to be very cognizant of who they are and what they want to do to us and understand who we're fighting.
Next questions? Do we have any last questions? All right, there.
You explained so many new bills. I have a question. Do we have any ideas how often these bills are rejected or not rejected? Old bills which are right now in place are going to be abolished, removed from law. Do we have any kind of process how these bills could be abolished? Old bills which we right now think bad bills. Does it happen?
Yes, it does happen. So every year we see some repeal. I don't know about the Colorado Digital Token Act that passed in 2017. I don't know. It was a cryptocurrency bill. I thought it was a pro-cryptocurrency bill, but they repealed it this year. I don't know exactly why, but it kind of made sure that cryptocurrency wasn't like a commodity being exchanged and everything for tax purposes. They repealed that bill this year, just as an example. But there's tons of other bills. Every year they repeal this and that, so they can introduce any number of bills to repeal previous year bills, to modify them, to change them, to do anything like that. One of the biggest ways to stop these bills is lawsuits. So Rocky Mountain gun owners this last year, one of the anti-gun bills that passed in 2023 was outline or making it illegal, or basically changing the legal requirements of who could buy a gun to be, you have to be 21 and older. So in the United States, it's been for a long time 18 and older. You can buy a firearm, at least a long gun like a rifle or a shotgun. Colorado last year passed a restriction saying you have to be 21 years or older to buy any type of firearm. That was challenged by my friends at Rocky Mountain Gun Owners. They sued. That law was stopped the same day it went into effect last year. So lawsuits, if it's unconstitutional, is a good opportunity to stop some of these bills, which I imagine we'll see with some of these gun bills. Like if the assault weapons bill had passed, I know there would have been lawsuits immediately from, National Association for Gun Rights, Rocky Mountain Gun Owners, Firearm Policy Coalition, Gun Owners America, probably the NRA, all these other groups would have jumped on it. But unfortunately, that's expensive. It's $1 million plus to do one of these lawsuits, and it could take months, it could take years. There's a lot of problems with it. So the best bet is to try and change who's in the legislature, if you ask me.
No, I'm talking about not blocking by courts, but blocking by senators or House representatives. If they ever come with idea, let's stop this bill, existing bill, because it damages our population.
Yeah, it could happen, but you need the majority. You need the majority in the legislature. So right now, these Democrats split between the moderates and the socialists. they can kind of hold each other in check in a way, in some regard. But yeah, you would need really a majority in the House or Senate to decide what bills are going to be heard, what bills are going to be assigned to what committee. And if you have that majority, you can stop any bill from going through, for sure. But it really depends who's serving in the legislature. I hope that maybe answers your question.
Brandon, thank you very much. The clarity on presentation of these bills is amazing. So, given that some of these have passed, but they haven't been signed, does your website have a list, or where's the best place to go to find out ones where we can call up Polis and say, please veto bill such and such?
The state legislature website is actually a phenomenal resource, leg.colorado.gov. You could go in there, search by bill. You can look for any bill number, any bill topic. Go into any of those, look by bill sponsor, and it'll tell you that status of the bill, if the governor signed it, if it passed, if it was sent to the governor, anything like that. So that's your best bet for sure. Leg.colorado.gov, the state legislature website, leg.colorado.gov. That's basically your resource for also ballot initiatives, which we talked about briefly, but also any of the bills, any of the legislation. You want to find out who your legislator is. You know, how many people here know who their state rep is, who their state senator is, right? That's where you go to search. Type in your address, and it'll tell you exactly who represents you, who's supposed to be representing you in the state government, right?
Real quick, I may have spaced out, but did you touch on the topic of CBDCs? Are they preparing us for CBDCs in the state by some sort of a law, or is that not their purview?
Nothing that I've seen. I'm sure there's something out there. I'm sure there's some talk of it on some level. But nothing I've seen. I think there was something maybe in the previous couple years that was something to do with it. I know you can pay your taxes to the state government in cryptocurrency now. So as wonderful as that is, you know. But nothing that I've seen, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on for sure.
3 more questions.
Do you think Polis is actually a libertarian?
I think he thinks he's a libertarian. He thinks he's a libertarian. And yeah, he identifies as a libertarian. No, definitely not. I mean, just the assault on property rights, on our guns, on all these other issues out there. I mean, it's been bad, you know. And I try on my Twitter, on the Libertarian Party as well, beat him up every chance we can to really call him out, you know, because he got such good treatment from Reason Magazine. They did this whole puff piece on him. John Stossel did this whole puff piece on him. You know, he's part of that Beltway libertarian crowd, the establishment DC quote unquote libertarians who consider themselves to be, but they're just really more moderate libertarians, I guess, than what most people would say. But he would consider himself that. He was the only Democrat who was a member of the Freedom Caucus in Congress, you know, with Thomas Massey and Ken Buck at the time, and Justin Amash and stuff like that. So he was big on raw milk and hemp seeds and marijuana and all those types of things. But I think he thinks he's a libertarian, but only when it's convenient, truly, right?
So I have a question for you. Do you have any resources for anyone who's interested in sort of like single issue coalitions? I've sort of toyed with the idea of advocating for raw milk because you can buy it in 16 states and it drives me nuts. So what would be your advice to pursue someone who wants to like just focus on one bill?
So if you want to focus on one bill, so right now is the best time, right? So say, and I've thought about this a lot. So say, you know, raw milk. We want to get raw milk passed next year. We want a good, clean raw milk bill. What I would do is start a petition. Start a petition right now online. Get a website, get some sort of domain, rawmilkcolorado.com, whatever it is. Get a petition up, market it all across social media, get it everywhere you can, spend some money advertising, collect those names, collect that database, get all those people registered, have a stack of petitions to go to a bill sponsor next year. So kind of November, December of this year, bills start being created and formulated. Go find a good, receptive legislator. Say, hey, listen, I got 5,000 people who signed this petition in support of raw milk. You're going to be their champion. You're going to be the hero. I might not agree with you on anything else, but I'm going to make you the #1 person with raw milk, and you're going to be the best friend of these 5,000 people. They might donate money to your campaign. They love that, right? They might vote for you in the next election, or when you want to become president of the universe. You know, politicians all love that. So that's what I would do, is try and build that grassroots list or database of people who support the issue, try and build some publicity on it, and then kind of find that legislator who's receptive towards it at the end of this year, get them to introduce the bill, and then you got to show up. I mean, the biggest thing ever, if you have a legislator pushing your bill, you have to go over the top and have as much good earned media coverage for them as you can. You show up with activists testifying in support of them, just celebrating them and how amazing they are, holding rallies and fundraisers for them, this and that. I mean, that's how it works, people, you know. But you show up there with this huge group of people in support of this raw milk bill, and he's on the media or she's on the media, and they're this big, wonderful person. Politicians love that. That'd be your best bet. And then, you know, just lobby the rest of the members of the legislature to support it. So that'd be the idea. If you could get somebody in leadership to push it in the majority, then you're probably guaranteed it's going to pass.
Last question.
I'm curious about your thoughts between the agreement between the Libertarian Party and the Republican Party for Libertarians not to run if the Republican candidate holds a certain amount of libertarian ideals, and will that make a difference in the upcoming November elections?
100% support that. Yeah, there's a video I did. If you go to freestatecolorado.com or my YouTube channel, I did a video with Hannah Goodman, Libertarian Party Colorado chairwoman, and Dave Williams, chairman of the Republican Party. Right after it was signed, I was like the first one to do an interview with them, all three of us, and we talked about this. 100% in support of it. So, for example, you know, we have some extreme people up there. You know, like I said, I'm not a Republican, but I want to see some Republicans win this November, you know, because I want to see some balance. I want to see that balance. I want to see it to be a little more even-keeled. I want to see some restraint on the part of some of these radical socialists. So, for example, I'm up in Greeley. I just moved up there. House District 50, Ryan Gonzalez lost. He's a Republican, lost to Mary Young, who voted for a lot of these bad bills this year. He lost by 330 votes 2 years ago. 330 votes, and there was a Libertarian who got 700 votes. So obviously, not every Libertarian voter is going to vote for a Republican, of course. There's a reason they're voting for a Libertarian. But nonetheless, getting a Libertarian out of the race as a quote-unquote spoiler can help. I'm sure it can help. And then, you know, go a little bit further. If they sign the pledge and they say, hey, listen, I support raw milk. I support ending civil asset forfeiture. I support ending the income tax, restoring our Second Amendment rights, on and on and on. They can reach out to Libertarian voters in that community and say, I'm the torchbearer of liberty. I'm the only one running who supports these issues that the Libertarian Party loves. And hopefully they earn a couple hundred votes, maybe more from it, and we get a good pro-liberty Republican elected. So 100% support of it. I hope it makes a difference. I hope we see Democrats lose 6 seats in the state House, 3 seats in the state Senate. It's my goal for what I want to try and help accomplish. And if that can happen, it'd go a long way towards slowing down some of the bad authoritarianism we've seen this year.
That's our talk. Give it up for Brandon Wark.
Thank you, everybody.